I know what you're thinking, Browns fans. When will this disaster finally be over? Well, you gotta ask yourself a question.
Do I feel lucky?
Lucky? Are you kidding me? I more feel like a punk out here, but what is coolin'? What's going on? We've got the Cleveland Browns today. We're gonna be talking about everything Browns, roster, coaching staff. What should this team be looking at this offseason as their pick is now locked in at number 2 overall? A lot of very interesting possibilities with the Deshaun Watson scenario. Can they get out of his money? Is there a potential relief? And hopefully those pictures keep coming out with him walking off of his boot and they can get out of his money. Overall, let's go into this. We'll dive into the roster first up. Then we'll get into a free agency strategy with money that they don't have. And then we'll talk about the 7-round mock draft. So let's start with the offensive line and the tackle position, where a lot of question marks. Let's just be real with this tackle room. Jedrick Wills, he's going to be gone after this season. I would say that 95 to almost 100% chance that he is already out the door. He made a business decision earlier in the season, of course, and ever since then, I think they've really had some issues with that with him, even benching him, and we shall see what happens. But I do think Jedrick Wills will be gone. DeJuan Jones stepping in his place at the left tackle position. He had his moments. Look, I don't know, and I don't feel great that he's long-term left tackle, but at the same time, I certainly feel good about giving him a shot. I would want to bring in competition, absolutely. Like, that is something that we need to do. But at the same time, DeJuan Jones is a guy that I feel like at this point with where they're at cap-wise, I don't know if they're going to be able to find a clear upgrade in free agency either, especially with the money that they do have. So DeJuan Jones, I'm okay penciling him in as a left tackle for this team. Jack Conklin on the opposite side, who was able to get healthy this season, and he has been their best offensive lineman probably on this entire roster this year. And him and Joel Bitonio, I would say, have been the 2 most steady guys on this offensive line throughout the good chunk of this season. And Conklin is under contract for the next 2 years. And I do think that they'll decide to keep him. They could move on from him, especially with the injuries that they've had. But with the depth, I mean, they've got guys, but a lot of dudes I don't feel great about starting at that right tackle position other than DeJuan Jones. No matter what, they're going to need to find tackle help. But I think that you roll into next season with Conklin and DeJuan Jones as your 2 starters. You draft, you develop, and then you reevaluate the situation from there because of where they're currently at and with their roster, etc. That is what I'm leaning towards. Jermaine Ifedi stepped up at left tackle and he struggled. James Houston was injured. So overall, I think this is an area that we're going to be looking at drafting, at least spending a day 2 pick on, and then also trying to find somebody on day 3 to be able to develop as well. Going on to the interior of the offensive line, you got steady Joel Bitonio going into the last year of his contract. So that's something we're going to have to look at, that left guard of the future. Ethan Pozick is a solid center. He had a bit of a step back this season, but obviously the continuity in this offense, the offensive line took a major step back this year for the Browns in general. I still think Pozick's a solid player. And you got Luke Whippler still around to develop. They could draft a center, though. I definitely think that is something they could get a little bit more depth. Nick Harris, they brought back with injury of Luke Whippler, but even he got injured. So just goes to show you the amount of injuries they dealt with on this offensive line. But Wyatt Teller is also a free agent at right guard in 2026. So both Bitonio and Wyatt Teller are both free agents in 2026. Now, and they could both, one of those guys, I doubt they would cut Joel Bitonio. Now, Wyatt Teller, he could be someone they move on or trade this offseason to get a little younger. Zach Sinter, I imagine, would end up taking that role at the right guard position. And I know he had a rough rookie season, but he's also somebody coming off a broken leg where those injuries, as we've seen from Tony Pollard, it takes you a full season to really get your strength back, because when you have a broken leg, especially as an offensive lineman, not being able to feel confident at playing your leg, and it's not just that. I'm sure he felt confident, but at the same time, like when you're not able to hit the weights and hit the offseason program to get strong and stuff like that, that's a real major setback as a rookie. Not even just, as a veteran, it would be a tough setback, but especially as a rookie. So I'm not ready to call Zach Sinter a 3rd-round bust or anything like that, and I feel good that he can be the long-term right guard. But I will be looking at drafting a guard, at least one, and maybe a center as well on this interior of the offensive line with Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. Even if they keep both of those guys for this 2025 season, they are both free agents in 2026. So no matter what, you need to draft like a left guard to be able to develop behind the great Joel Bitonio. We move on to tight end, and David Njoku also banged up throughout this season. That's going to be kind of the theme of this whole roster breakdown, is the amount of injuries that they faced on this roster was traumatic, to say the least. And I will say Jordan Akins was a solid player that stepped up in the wake of David Njoku when he was out, or even when he was on the field. Like, Atkins did a great job as that number 2 tight end for this team, and he was a good receiver for them and a solid blocker as well. Blake Whiteheart, somebody that I like coming out of Wake Forest, was also another guy that stepped up and was able to be that third tight end for this team. So in general, like, those 3 guys were good for them. And Njoku's a talented guy. Now, you could see he looked a little slower this season. Like, I felt like he looked bigger too this year. I don't know what was going on. Maybe he just was a little bit out of shape with all those injuries, trying to rehab so much. That can deal with some strength and conditioning things as well. I'm certain with it. But David Njoku is still a beast and a top 10 tight end in the NFL when healthy. But I think that you're going to have to look at the future, because David Njoku is also a free agent in 2026. And with the money that they don't have in 2026 as well, especially if they move on from Deshaun Watson this season or next season, depending if it's a post-June 1st cut this year or next year, those are all things that it's going to be hard to pay guys like David Njoku. So I think that you, especially in a good tight end class, I'm going to be looking at drafting a tight end to be able to develop behind Njoku for a season. And in that, I think that would be a really good idea for this team. On to the wide receiving core now, and you got Jerry Jeudy, who has been really good, I will say. And this is one of those things I was saying at the beginning of the season. People are discounting the Jerry Jeudy trade. This was one of my favorite trades of the offseason. Jerry Jeudy, getting him on the price that they got him in the contract that they got him on. Jeudy, to me, is like an Amari Cooper type of player. I think he's going to get better with age. He's an athletic guy. He's a great route runner. Just needs to get a little stronger with his hands and more consistent. And you saw that this season. Now, a lot of his yards did come in that Denver game. He had a couple of, the consistency I want to still see with Jerry Jeudy, but I think he can turn into a top 20, 15 type of receiver in the NFL and do that for the next 3-4 years for this football team. You just need more stability at quarterback. When Jameis Winston was playing at his peak for this team, Jerry Jeudy was dominant, man. He really was. So I'm excited to get, you have somebody that can be at least a high-end number 2 on this roster and borderline 1. Cedric Tillman, and as we talked about with Jameis Winston, when he was playing and he was rocking, Cedric Tillman finally was showing up, man, and it looked like there was some chemistry here in this wide receiving core. So between Tillman and Jeudy, both under contract. Now, Tillman just got to get healthy, but Elijah Moore is a free agent. You got David Bell coming back next season, Jamari Thrash, a late pick, 5th-round pick from Louisville this past season. So he should be emerging as, at least if nothing else, a special teamer for them and a returner. But I think that you could draft somebody else in here, and I'm looking at drafting the third guy, like maybe a dynamic receiver into this room. And that's what I would say that I'm going to be looking at doing, right? Jeudy is your route runner. You got Tillman as your big-bodied. Where's your dynamic, shifty guy, or somebody that can also be a deep threat? That's what I'm going to be looking for in this receiving room. The running back room now, Nick Chubb, and he has been a Hall of Famer. He should be a Hall of Famer, and Nick Chubb has been so instrumental for this team on and off the football field. Unfortunately, the knee injury is caught up. It's really challenging. And I almost just say, if you're Cleveland, let Nick Chubb go to a contender. At this point, with where they're at, that's why I'm not going to be so keen on re-signing Nick Chubb. Now, if he wants to come back, if he wants to be a Cleveland Brown for life, you're bringing him back. Like, that's what it is. You keep your Hall of Famers, you keep your core guys. That's just what you need to do as a football team. But you also need to be investing in the future here at this running back position and trying to get more dynamic, trying to help out this room, because it has been a problem all season long. And they do need to get back to more of their identity of running the football and having that ground game. So I will be, especially in a very, very good running back class, I'm going to be drafting at least 1 running back, probably 2, because I think that would be really smart for this team. You do have Jerome Ford under contract, Pierre Strong's under contract, but besides that, they certainly could use some influx of youth and talent into this room. Okay, this is where frustration really kicks in, and I don't want to spend too much time and too much pain for you guys, because I know you're probably saying, Baker, please come back. We're so sorry. Anyway, what's done is done, and you have to move on. And Deshaun Watson, whether you cut him this season or next, I do think they end up holding on to him with the injury now, and maybe they can try to keep milking this, or not milk, but they can hopefully keep getting those pictures out or doing whatever they can to try to recoup money. I know they have an insurance policy, so they should be able to recoup money no matter what. But the hope is that they can get maybe over $100 million back from Deshaun Watson that's guaranteed, and be able to move off of his contract completely. That would be the dream scenario, of course. But Deshaun Watson, clearly, he is not going to play another down as a Cleveland Brown for this football team. I don't even know if he's going to play another down in the NFL. Let's just be real. And of course, I know there's off the field stuff, and I don't want to include any of that with Deshaun Watson. I know people will hate Deshaun Watson and everything, and for good reason. There's a lot of things out there, but at the same time, everybody makes mistakes. So I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he has changed. Maybe he hasn't. I don't know. I have not met the guy. I've never talked to him. So I don't want to hate on him or anything like that. What's done is done. the things he did is unacceptable, and we move on from that. As an organization, you have to move on, and you have to look to the future here. So to me, you're looking at Kirk Cousins, you're looking at bringing back Jameis Winston, and you're looking at the draft. Okay, those are all things you have to do this offseason. This quarterback room needs to be completely overhauled, and it needs to start looking at the future here. And as I talk about, you bring back a veteran like Jameis Winston, or you bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins who could be brought back on the cheap. If Atlanta ends up moving on and just cutting him straight up, then you could do like a Russell Wilson scenario for like the Pittsburgh Steelers did and get him on the cheap on that vet minimum type of deal. And that's really all that they could spare financially. So overall, that's my conclusion on this. I know I spent too much time on it. In general, you're probably saying, let's move on. We know what it is. Let's move on to brighter pastures, though, and start with this defense and the defensive interior. And this defense has had some guys really step up, too, for them, with Shelby Harris getting injured. Dalvin Tomlinson's also been solid as usual, right? I mean, he's just Mr. Rock Solid. You got Michael Hall Jr. as a rookie. He has really shown some big-time flashes, especially at the end of the season. He is looked like a bona fide starter and could be a stud in the NFL. So Hall, Tomlinson would make a dynamic pair going into the next season. Harris is under contract and you keep him, right? I mean, you can't really get out of the contract anyway. So I feel like their interior is in a pretty good spot. They're going to need a little bit more depth. They're going to need to draft somebody. That's probably a day 3 type of need, because Sam Kamara is a nice backup to have, and he's somebody with breaks as well. Like, you've got some guys in here. Now, Maurice Hurst, I don't expect him to be back. He is a good football player, but with their cap space, maybe he goes somewhere else. And especially with Michael Hall stepping up the way he stepped up, I think he's going to be a very, very good player for this team. So Harris, Hall, Tomlinson, Kamara, Briggs, those are 5 guys going into next season. And then you draft somebody maybe on day 3 to be that 6th guy, maybe a nose tackle, or a 1-tech in this defense. Okay, I think that's what they're going to be looking at, is a developmental 1-tech. Dalvin Tomlinson is under contract, but in 2026, that's when you start thinking about getting a developmental, having somebody that could potentially be the starter there. These edge rushers, though, and this is where the trade rumors start to circulate now. Myles Garrett, if he says, I'm done, I want to go to a contender, you have to respect that. So those are going to be some serious things that Andrew Berry's going to have to monitor, see how that all works out. Now, if he says, look, I'm ready to stay, whatever you guys want to do, then I'm keeping him unless it's a deal that I can't refuse. And what I mean by that is 2 first-round picks at minimum. That's what I'm giving, to give up Myles Garrett. If it's 1 first-rounder, especially a late first-rounder, that's not enough for Myles Garrett. Let's just be real. You cannot find an impact like Myles Garrett most of the times at the end of the draft, much less at the top of the draft. So it's got to be a package that would blow me away to give up Myles Garrett. And he's not like an old football player either. You can still get 4 or 5 more years out of Myles Garrett. And he's under contract, too, for quite several more years. So I'm not it's got to be a deal that I feel good about to give him up. So I'm not also going to speculate on a trade. If that happens, we'll redo the mock draft from there and we'll discuss those scenarios. But in this case scenario, I'm going to keep Myles Garrett. He's got, I got to keep Myles Garrett. Isaiah McGuire, those looked really, really good. Tobey Maguire, right? He's a little Spider-Man, a little Spider-Hobbs out here. But Isaiah McGuire been a really good number 2 edge rusher, kind of even beat out Okoronkwo at the end of the season as the starter now. And McGuire going into year number 3 next season, but this is his 2nd year, and he's really developed along as a number 2 edge rusher. That's why I'm not super worried about this, especially if Myles Garrett is back. They've got a solid edge room with McGuire stepping up. Okoronkwo is still under contract next season. You got Wright getting back healthy. James Houston's a restricted free agent, so if they want him back, they can bring him back relatively cheap as a situational pass rusher. Overall, and you got Cameron Thomas there, I'm still going to draft an edge rusher, get a little bit of depth here, but in general, I think they're in a pretty good spot overall. To this linebacking core now, it all starts with JOK. Hopefully he gets healthy and is all ready to go for a training camp in next season. You need him. He's a stud. But Jordan Hicks, under contract for 1 more season. He's had a really good year, but he is going to be a free agent in 2026. So I'm going to draft somebody in that round 3 through round 5 range. I think makes a lot of sense. Somebody to be able to develop. And they have Diabate. They have Watson to be able to, be depth players. Reed's restricted. Devin Bush is a unrestricted free agent. So, and I think he'll get us a job somewhere else. I really do. I think somebody's going to pay him because he had a really nice back end of the second half of the season. And obviously being a first round former pick, teams are going to look at that and say, oh, we want to sign this guy, especially with the way he played at the end of the season. So I expect him to get a contract that may be able to outbid Cleveland, unfortunately. So I hate to see that, but it is what it is. And that's okay. I wish Devin Bush the best. And overall, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Jordan Hicks, your 2 starters, let's find a little bit more depth here. Let's find a developmental guy next to JOK, just in case, after this next season, Hicks is not able to retain. Onto the cornerback room, and this is where we need to add some help. And we need to add a playmaker into the secondary in general, right? their lack of turnovers this season was a problem. So I'm going to be looking at adding a ball hawk into this room, whether that's a corner, whether that's a safety, but especially a cornerback. Martin Emerson has taken a massive step back this season. Like, he had a really good 2023, and then this season, man, it was rough. And I still like Martin Emerson. He's super talented. I'm not ready to give up on him. I'm not ready to pull the plug or anything like that, but you need to add some talent in here. You need to add some reinforcements. Greg Newsome also has had his struggles in the slot. You do have Cameron Mitchell, so he's somebody also in that slot. So I'm not like overly worried about that, but I do want to add help into this cornerback room. It is a early need for this team. You need to find that guy with Denzel Ward, and Denzel Ward has been fantastic, but who can be that reliable number 2 guy? So I'm going to be looking at in this draft and finding some help in this cornerback room. Martin Emerson also will be going into a contract year. So is Greg Newsome. So that's why I'm saying, like, we need to add a cornerback no later than round 3, in my opinion. To the safety room now, and you got your starters under contract with Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill. You got Ronnie Hickman as well. So those 3 guys being under contract, I feel good about. Ronnie McLeod's had a nice, finish to the season as well. Finished on a high note. He may end up retiring. We shall see. If he wants to come back, I have no problem. He shouldn't be super expensive or anything like that. Good, solid rotational player and had a really nice career. Now, as I talked about with the cornerback room, I wouldn't mind adding a ball hawk in here. I do think that's something they could add. And Grant Delpit's not really a ball hawk. I mean, he's a great blitzer and he's a great box player. Juan Thornhill, I want to see more plays out of Juan. Also, I would love to see, Ronnie Hickman get more involved as well. But I think that between those 3 guys, you have a solid group of safeties. Trey Dean's a practice squad guy. Maybe you keep an eye out on him as a big mismatch tight end eraser, possibly. We shall see, from Florida, the Gator. Overall, I'm not super worried about the safety room, but as I talk about, I'll be looking at adding a little bit of depth, if nothing else. Go on to the free agency strategy and start off with the team restructures. Now, looking at Deshaun Watson's contract, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get off it. There's just too much dead cap to be able to get off of this season. Like, they would have to do so much, and I don't even know if it's possible with they're at. Maybe it is. Maybe they can work Houdini, but I've just looked at all the restructures that they can make. They've already made a good amount of restructures to the point where they can't even do a whole ton more. So there's only a couple of guys that they can truly restructure, like Jack Conklin, Denzel Ward. So that's where it makes it really, really challenging to even post June 1st this with Deshaun. And as I talk about too, there's a really good chance that they could get either the insurance money to get some of his cap back, / maybe even get out of his contract completely, depending on what reports are true and all those sort of things. So we'll see how that works out. No matter what, Deshaun Watson, they're going to have to figure this situation cap-wise. I'm just going to go ahead and restructure $44 million, and that saves $33 million. So that's just kind of a general basis to help us get that cap in order. They're going to have to restructure, do something to move some money to be able to get themselves in control there cap-wise, to be able to at least re-sign some of their guys or get some dudes in free agency. Also going to restructure Jack Conklin and Denzel Ward to save $18 million between the two. I'm deciding to keep Jack Conklin and same, obviously Denzel Ward we're keeping. So this is pretty easy and it's going to be pretty quick for the team re-signs, but I'm going to re-sign Winston and Hudson. And Winston going to come back on a 1-year, $5 million deal in this scenario. Just a little bit of a boost from this past year that they paid him. But I do think bringing him back or bringing in a Kirk Cousins, depending on if he is cut from the Atlanta Falcons, which we will keep an eye out on. And I think that could be a very realistic possibility for this football team. No matter what, I see them bringing in a bridge quarterback, somebody, a veteran, and then they're going to draft somebody. Like, that's my guess. And then Hudson on defense, as some special teams and some depth will keep him around. I also budget in some practice squad guys, some UDFAs, restricted guys like James Houston, Trey Dean, etc., that'll fill out the roster. This is also pretty simple, unfortunately, right? It's free agent signing time, and we have nobody to sign. Our draft picks are going to count like $12 to $14 million. Remember, that number 2 overall pick is going to be close to $7 million range. It may even be $7 million. So we have to budget that in. We don't have a whole ton of money here, but I don't think we need to sign anybody because we're going to get a lot of guys in the draft. Man, we got 12 draft picks, so that's going to add a lot of depth to the roster and hopefully a couple of starters at least as well. Look at this roster once more before we get into the draft. Highlight those needs. And offensive line, I'm going to be adding multiple guys on this offensive line. Like, we got to find some developmental guys, get some tackle depth, left guard of the future, you name it. We're going to be adding some offensive line in this class. And then tight end, wide receiver, absolutely. We'll be adding another playmaker on the outside. And I got a good idea for that too. But tight end, also big need for this team for the long haul because David Njoku was going last year of his contract. So between day 2, early day 3, I think we can find a nice developmental tight end in this draft class. Quarterback, it's a 1st through 3rd round priority, right? I mean, really, ideally, it's a first-round need, but in this draft class, we'll debate that and talk about it, but I'm thinking day 2 makes a lot of sense for this team. And then running back, also a day 2 type of priority for me, day 2 early, day 3. At least get some depth too later in the draft as well. I think if we could add 2 running backs. Defensively wise, I think defensive line, we're in a pretty good spot. I'll look at adding some more depth, but I don't think these are like huge needs, especially right now with where they're at as a roster. Now, if they make some trades, if Myles Garrett's end up, moving on, then that we'll have to reevaluate when that time comes. But for right now, I think this is day 3. You add some depth, you add in some future talent to this roster. My priorities are more in the secondary for this team. Adding a cornerback or a safety, something. I preferably would be a corner, somebody that can be a ball hawk in their secondary and add some more playmaking skills on the outside, in the slot, you name it. They need an upgrade in that number 2 cornerback spot. So I will be looking at adding another guy, a playmaker in the room. It's draft time, and this is where we get to have some fun. I'm going Travis Hunter at the number 2 overall pick. Andrew Berry, keep the phones open. Absolutely. Like, that is a huge thing. I don't project trades or anything like that in these mock drafts. I might have a little fun with it. I definitely think that is a real possibility for this Cleveland Browns team. But for me, if you're sticking and picking, I'm getting Travis Hunter, I'm getting Abdul Carter, I'm going with one of those guys. And then you look at the quarterback position on day 2. Just in this draft class, I think it makes a lot more sense. I'm getting one of those blue chip prospects. Hunter, to me, is a blue chip prospect type of guy. In this draft class, he is unbelievable. I mean, any class, he is a 2-way phenom star that's going to add help as a receiver. And then also on defense, he's going to be a ball hawk, a playmaker, exactly what this team needs. He is the perfect number 2 opposite of Denzel Ward. I love that addition to the secondary. On to round number 2. This is where we're going quarterback. Jalen Milroe into the offense. You see Lamar Jackson twice a year. I want to go ahead and get our own hopeful Lamar Jackson. He needs some time to develop, but you have Jameis Winston, or you bring in a Kirk Cousins type. I think Kirk Cousins would be great too, because, he could learn as more of a passer, right? How to get, be more developed as a passer. Like, maybe Kirk Cousins can help him a little bit in that regard. Anyway, like, whoever you bring in as your veteran, Jameis Winston, Kirk Cousins, you have a guy like Jalen Milroe now to be able to develop and be that future quarterback, and not forcing that quarterback at the number 2 overall pick is absolutely vital, in my opinion, for the Cleveland Browns to be able to really get this thing right. If you miss, you miss, but that hopefully will set you up for the 2026 draft, have a high pick. Maybe if you do trade down, you have more draft capital, etc. But for this, you get Jalen Milroe, you let him develop and see how you can roll with there. I think it's the smartest move for this team and where they're at right now. Round pick is a little bit of a shocker, but I'm going Harold Fanning Jr. He's also going to add another playmaker into this offense, but he can be that great developmental tight end behind David Njoku, especially with the injuries that they've had with Njoku this season. I think it makes a lot of sense to get that guy. And Harold Fanning Jr., we had to let go of Jordan Atkins, which is a tough loss, but I feel like with adding in Fanning Jr., Blake Whiteheart, those are your 2 backups going into this season with David Njoku. Fanning's going to be an immediate impact right away, and then for the long haul, he's going to be a great tight end for this football team. Next 3rd round pick, I'm going with another playmaker. It's all offense out here. I mean, Travis Hunter is going to help them out on defense, but Devin Neal, the running back from Kansas, he is underrated in my opinion. This guy is a phenomenal player. He's kind of a little bit like a Bucky Irvin type in my opinion. I mean, they're different football players, but in terms of like the underappreciation that Devin Neal gets in this draft class, I feel like he's just not talked about enough. He breaks tackles at a high level. He's one of the shifty guys, like one-on-one. I always see this guy breaking ankles. Not literally, of course. Hopefully not. I mean, I don't want to see any of that. But he just makes dudes look silly one-on-one with that nasty one-cut jump that he has, man. It's really phenomenal to watch with Devin Neal. And he's got enough burst. He's not the long speed guy, but he's got that short area quickness that you want to see. He's a good receiving back as well. He's going to be that heir apparent, hopefully, for Nick Chubb, or at least add a good 1-2 punch with Jerome Ford, and we'll maybe add another player in this draft, too, at the running back position. On to round number 4, Blake Miller, developmental tackle. Ideally, I would have liked to have gotten a tackle a little bit earlier, I'm not going to lie, but with some of where it's at in this class, I just felt like Blake Miller at this point makes a lot of sense. We get him in the 4th round here. I think he's going to cut, whether he's that 3rd round pick at 93 or 102, you get him at one of those spots. You get yourself a developmental right tackle, left tackle. He plays right tackle at Clemson. I view him as a nice guy to be able to develop for a season or 2 behind Jack Conklin. He may need 2 seasons. He's a young football player, but he has all the talent. He's got all the tools. I think he needs to really work on his leverage. He needs to work on his like his ability to stay square with defensive linemen. I think that's one of the things he struggles with, is other than his hand placements, gets a little lungy too at times. But he certainly has all the tools, the talent, and the size profile to be a really good tackle in the NFL. Where we decided to go and get a nice developmental linebacker here. And here's somebody that would be a great combo with JOK, in my opinion. JOK, obviously the athletic freak, and Kobe King's a good athlete as well. Penn State, you know what I'm saying? They all got athletes there. But he is a really, really nice run defender. He's nice around the box. He's a good blitzer. He's got good length. He's able to take on blockers too, man. So I just love that 1-2 punch with JOK. And remember, he's not the great, I wouldn't say he's coverage guy, all right? I don't think that's really going to be his game at the next level, and that's okay. A lot of times linebackers, you're in one category of the other, but I think Kobe King is going to be a really, really nice box linebacker for this team. He's got plenty enough speed, plenty enough burst to be able to go sideline to sideline. Once again, not an elite athlete by any standards. And I also do see him in coverage. Like he misdiagnoses things at times, and in misdirection has caught him up. Like that, when I was going through his film, doing a deep dive on him, I saw him get fooled by misdirection a little bit, one too many often. I had to write a note on that, but a really good football player and somebody that I feel is underrated in this draft class. And I think he's going to be a very, very nice developmental linebacker for a team. Oh, we got to have a Hoosier on here, baby. Let's go. As I'm a graduate of a Hoosier, and CJ West, the interior defensive lineman, he is a really, really nice one tech there for them on that front, and he has been a great run defender, somebody that you get to develop behind Dalvin Tomlinson for a couple of years and be a rotational player early on. So that's kind of my view on it with CJ West, and him and Adam West can go Batman and Robin style line on da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Batman. No, I'm joking. But anyway, go get a nice interior run defender to be able to develop on that defense line on day 3. Our next pick, we're going to add some more depth on the defensive line. So going back-to-back defensive line, Elijah Roberts really had a nice season at SMU, been one of those key cogs for them on that defense side of the football, and somebody that's been a two-way player as well for that SMU defensive line, somebody that can kick on the inside and really be a handful for guards and stuff like that. And same thing here, I think, for the Cleveland Browns. Get yourself another pass rusher, at least some more depth on the interior and off the edge. Let's go ahead and have the biggest offensive tackle room in the NFL, right? Adding in Haleem Pierce from Rutgers. He's got his limitations, just like DeJuan Jones has with the lack of foot speed and whatnot, the range, but he has got tremendous size, tremendous run blocking ability, and somebody that when you're staring down an edge rusher, you're like, oh, this guy, if you're staring down an offensive tackle as an edge rusher and you go up against Haleem Pierce, you're like, oh, man, I'm just going to try to run around you and hope I can get around you. Anyway, just trying to find more developmental tackles at the end of the draft. On to our next 6th-round pick, I'm going D'Artagnan Tinsley from Cincinnati, plays left guard. He's going to give them some more depth on the interior. So just trying to find some more developmental guys on that front behind Joel Bitonio to help them out. Remember, we lost Michael Dunn in free agency. Now, Zach Zinter will be the third guy, the swing guy. But that would be something. You add in D'Artagnan Tinsley to be some more developmental guys on your interior offensive line. And you remember, a lot of times with these guards, you can hit on them later in the draft. Development is key. Final 6th-round pick, I'm going Donovan Edwards. The Don, right? He's had a rough season. And even last year, I thought he got way overhyped. Now, as a guy at the end of the draft, I like that, right? I think this makes a lot of sense as a receiving guy. That's, I think, where he's going to be making his bread and butter at the next level. So we got Devin Neal. You got Donovan Edwards here later in the draft. You still have Jerome Ford. You got Pierre Strong. Those are kind of your rotational forward going into this next season. Just trying to fill out this running back room with a lot of different skill sets. Final pick of the draft, Yam Banks. I almost want to say Yum Banks, but Ole Miss safety. He transferred actually from South Alabama, and he is somebody that at the end of the draft as a developmental guy, I think he has upside here. Now, he had a rough season from what I heard. So I've not watched the film on Yam Banks, but he was benched. Now, some of those things I'm sure probably just missed, diagnosis, with the new scheme that he was going against too. I imagine first-year player in that Ole Miss defense. Those can be problems, missed tackles. So we'll see. I'd have to visit the tape on that. But a guy with some athletic upside and some potential, and at least if nothing else, going to give you some special teams ability at the end of the draft. So let's recap everything up here that we were able to do. Talk about coaching real quick and GM Andrew Berry. He's got a major offseason ahead, especially if he wants to be the GM going into 2026 and beyond. He's going to have to really nail some things here, starting with that quarterback position. Between free agency and the draft, this is going to be huge for him, whether he retains his job in 2026. Coaching-wise, Kevin Stefanski, I like Stefanski. It's just he has really gotten some unfortunate things. So let's hope that the quarterback, they can hit on, they can agree, they can get this thing right, and they can finally figure this thing out, man, because that has been the biggest thorn. But I do like Stefanski a lot. And defensively wise, you got Jim Schwartz. I like him as well. Like, I think that the staff is relatively in place. There are some things that they can work here and there, but overall, like, I think the staff can be there. It's just a matter, you got to get this quarterback situation under control. You have to figure out some things cap-wise. Get your money under control, too. I do think this is going to be more like a 3-year process, which unfortunately, that's just what it is. But with that guaranteed money, you're going to have a plan in place to be able to put yourself on a good timeline to be able to get your cap back in control. Talking strictly roster-wise, everyone's going to have their own opinions on what you do with that number 2 overall pick. Obviously, you could trade down. You could take a quarterback at 2. Trade down would be option 1 for sure, especially if you get a really nice haul. But for me, I kind of feel great about getting Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter if I'm the Cleveland Browns. Like, I have no problem. They've got 12 draft picks. So the only thing I would consider is trading down for draft picks in 2026, especially if you're looking at a quarterback then. But I love getting Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and calling it a day. I think that would be a great deal for this team. So that's what we did. We got Travis Hunter. I think he'd be an excellent addition in their secondary and as another playmaker for them. David Bell can rotate with Jamari Thrash. I would say you keep Hunter as more of a cornerback for this team full time, and then you have Hunter play money downs, play a certain rotation on offense with Bell, with Thrash, depending on those developmental, how those guys go. But you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Cedric Tillman, so I feel good about their receiving core now, and I think they got a lot of good weapons. Offensive line, I would have liked to have done more. I'll be real. I would have liked to have done more, but I just kind of felt in this draft class, where some of the strengths were and the weaknesses, I'm hoping that we can hold on to Juan Jones getting healthy, Jack Conklin healthy now. Those can be your starting tackles. We did add Halim Pierce, Blake Miller. Miller is going to be a guy that could step up early in his career if he had to, okay? So he can definitely step into one of those tackle positions if you have injuries. Now, the interior of the offensive line, you got Zach Center, you got Luke Whippler. So those are more your backups going into you would ideally probably try to bring in a veteran too here. I didn't do what I would like. I would like to have drafted a guard maybe on day 2 or early day 3 to be a developmental piece behind Joel Bitonio, but just with the board, the way it went out and whatnot, the value, that's kind of the way it went. But we did add some depth there with D'Artagnan at Tinsley. And running back wise, we added a couple of guys, a couple of studs hopefully for this team. Devin Neal, Donovan Edwards. You got Jerome Ford still under contract. Same thing with Pierce Strong. So those are kind of your rotation of guys. I think Devin Neal is going to be able to step in right away and be a big contributor, just like Bucky Irvin and some of these rookie running backs that have been able to step up. I really feel good about Devin Neal being able to play couple hundred snaps early on as a rookie. I really do. I like him a lot. Quarterback-wise, you add in Jalen Milroe. And yes, you're shooting for the moon here, all right? And it is what it is. You may hit, you may not. But he's got all the developmental upside. I just feel way better about selecting Jalen Milroe in the second round than I do about going Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall. That's just me personally, and I know some people will disagree with that, and that's fair. Everyone's got their own opinions, and I respect that. I like this, this is the route that I go, and this is the way I'm rocking it. But you bring back Jameis Winston to be that bridge quarterback. Maybe you bring in a Kirk Cousins. A lot of options on the table, but in this case, Jameis back. Jalen Milroe is your developmental quarterback. Defensively wise, we didn't add a whole ton of draft picks other than Travis Hunter, of course. It's just Travis Hunter. He's a stud. He's going to be unbelievable next to Denzel Ward on the opposite end. And he's going to be that absolute playmaker that this team needs. So hopefully you're getting a lot more turnovers next season. Probably even double the turnovers maybe with a guy like Travis Hunter in there. And you still have Martin Emerson. You're still going to compete for a spot. And remember, Travis Hunter is going to be playing 2 ways anyway. So you're going to still call upon Martin Emerson to be playing. And maybe he can have a little bit of a resurgence. And he could be a guy that could end up being a trade deadline guy. And maybe you can get, swing at least an early day 3 pick for him. You never know. Okay. He's still super talented. Somebody would be willing to give, I imagine, a 5th round pick for him or something, right? He's a good football player. Just needs to, cornerback's a little bit of a up and down volatile position. And then we go on to the safety room where we just add in Yam Banks. Going to be some depth, special teams, linebacker Kobe King. Going to be a nice understudy there for Jordan Hicks. Give you a little more depth too behind Debate and Reed, etc. Hudson, Watson. Defensive line, we had a couple of guys. Again, more depth. CJ West going to be a nice developmental 1-tech. Elijah Roberts, bit of a 2-way player. Can play a little interior, play a little edge. A little bit more depth as well in that defense line. But Myles Garrett, we had coming back in this scenario. So I didn't prioritize, especially with Isaiah McGuire stepping up. You got Oronkwo coming to bloopers section over here. I can't say it, man. My tongue's twisting. You're like, get it out, G-Sling. I'm trying. Anyway, pardon me on that. Some of these names are really tough for my vocabulary skills are not the best. I'll be honest with you. I just barely passed those throughout my years. Tried my best, though. I did. Anyway, that's going to do it here for the Cleveland Browns. Let me know what you think. Agree or disagree. What would you do differently? And I hope you guys have a really good day.